What if I told you the Cleveland Browns are about to make a decision that could define the next decade of this franchise? And what if I told you that decision might already be too late? Look, I'm not here to sugarcoat this. The Browns are sitting at 0-5, and that's not just disappointing. It's borderline catastrophic for a team that had Super Bowl whispers floating around the locker room just a few months ago. But here's where it gets interesting, because what's happening right now in Cleveland isn't just about wins and losses. It's about identity. It's about whether this organization has the guts to make the hard calls when everything's on the line. Let me paint you a picture. Last Sunday against Pittsburgh, yeah, that game we all want to forget, the Browns got steamrolled 27-13. But forget the final score for a second. What really tells the story is this: Cleveland has not scored 20 points in a single game this entire season. Read that again. Not once. For a franchise that's supposed to be competing in one of the toughest divisions in football, that's not a red flag, that's a 5-alarm fire. Now, here's where things get spicy. Deshaun Watson threw the ball 52 times against the Steelers. 52 attempts for barely over 200 yards. That's less than 4.5 yards per attempt, which in today's NFL is basically moving backwards. And the questions everyone's asking aren't just about Watson anymore, they're about Kevin Stefanski too. Why is your quarterback dropping back 52 times when nothing's working? Where's the balance? Where's the creativity? Where's the offensive identity that got this man Coach of the Year honors? But I want you to stay with me here, because the real story isn't just about what's going wrong. It's about what could go right, and the name that's been setting Brown's social media absolutely on fire: Shedeur Sanders. Now I know what you're thinking. He's still in college. He's not even drafted yet. You're absolutely right. But the energy around this kid, the way Browns fans are rallying behind the idea of him in orange and brown, that tells you everything you need to know about where this fan base's head is at right now. They're not just frustrated with the present, they're desperate for a future they can believe in. Scroll through Browns Twitter for 5 minutes, and you'll see it everywhere. Tank for Shedur. Give us Sanders, and let's start over. We need a quarterback with that dog in him. The sentiment is crystal clear. Fans don't just want change, they're demanding it. They're watching this kid light it up at Colorado, making throws that make NFL scouts drool, showing poise under pressure that veterans would envy, and they're thinking, that's what we need. That's our guy. And here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. This isn't just about talent. Shedeur Sanders brings something else to the table that you can't coach and you can't draft: swagger. Confidence. That it factor that makes franchises relevant again. His name alone generates buzz. His game creates highlights. And in a league where narratives matter almost as much as wins, that's currency you can't ignore. But let's pump the brakes for just a second and talk reality. The Browns have invested everything in Deshaun Watson. I'm talking draft picks, guaranteed money, the whole franchise's reputation. Walking away from that isn't just a football decision. It's admitting you made one of the biggest mistakes in NFL history. That's a tough pill to swallow, even when the evidence is staring you right in the face every Sunday. And Stefanski? The man's coaching for his job right now, whether the front office admits it or not. 5 games, 0 wins, an offense that looks like it's running plays from 1985. That's not the resume of a guy who's safe. Some fans are already calling for Jim Schwartz to take over as head coach, believing his defensive mind and no-nonsense approach might be exactly what this team needs. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: when your defense is keeping you in games and your offense can't score 20 points, maybe the guy calling offensive plays isn't the right guy to lead the entire operation. The Browns have a date with destiny coming up against the Miami Dolphins, another struggling team, sitting at 1-5. This is what we call a must-win game, and I don't use that phrase lightly in Week 7. But for Cleveland, this is it. This is where Watson either shows he can still be that guy, or where the calls for change become impossible to ignore. Because if the Browns lose this game, if they fall to 0-6 with the offense still sputtering, and the fan base getting more restless by the day, all those Shedeur Sanders dreams suddenly start looking less like fantasy and more like inevitability. And before we go any further, if you're getting value from this breakdown, if you want to stay ahead of all the latest Browns news and analysis, do me a favor, smash that like button and subscribe to Browns Breakout. We're building something special here, a community of die-hard fans who aren't afraid to speak truth and demand excellence from this franchise. Let's grow this thing together. Now let's talk about what makes Shedeur Sanders so special, because this isn't just hype. At Colorado, he's putting up numbers that have NFL GMs circling games on their calendars. His arm talent is legitimate. We're talking about a guy who can make every throw on the route tree with velocity and accuracy. His pocket presence is surprisingly mature for a college kid. And maybe most importantly, he performs under pressure. When the game's on the line, when his team needs a play, he delivers. But here's what really separates him. He's been groomed for this moment his entire life. Having Shedeur Sanders as your father and coach means you've been preparing for NFL stardom since you could walk. The mental side of the game? He's years ahead of most prospects. The media pressure? He's been handling it since high school. The expectations? They don't faze him, they fuel him. Imagine this scenario. The Browns finish this season in the basement of the AFC North. They have a top 3 pick. Shedeur Sanders is sitting there on the board, and Cleveland has the chance to pair him with a talented defense, weapons like Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and one of the best defensive lines money can buy. That's not a rebuild, that's a reload. That's a franchise-altering moment that could have the Browns competing for Super Bowls within 2 years. But here's the flip side, and we need to be honest about this too. Drafting a quarterback high means admitting the Watson trade was a disaster. It means eating an ungodly amount of guaranteed money. It means enduring the national media circus that would inevitably follow. And it means trusting your scouting department to get it right after they've already gotten it so spectacularly wrong. That's a lot of variables. That's a lot of pressure. And for an organization that's been snake-bitten for decades, it's the kind of decision that could either launch a dynasty or set the franchise back another 5 years. The NFL is a copycat league, and right now, we're seeing teams realize something crucial. If you don't have the right quarterback, nothing else matters. You can have the best defense in football, the best coaching staff, the most talented roster top to bottom, but if you can't score points, if you can't trust your quarterback to win games when it matters, you're just spinning your wheels. Cleveland is learning this lesson the hard way. And the fans? They're not stupid. They see what's happening. They watch other teams with young, dynamic quarterbacks putting up 30, 35, 40 points a game, and then they watch their Browns struggle to crack 15. That's not just frustrating, it's heartbreaking. Because this fan base has been through everything. The move to Baltimore, the expansion restart, the parade of failed quarterbacks, the decades of disappointment. They deserve better. They deserve a team that's not just competitive, but exciting. Electric. Fun to watch. And that's what Shedeur Sanders represents. Hope. Excitement. A reason to believe that the future could be different from the past. Look, I get it. It's easy to get caught up in the shiny new toy syndrome. It's easy to think the grass is greener with a different quarterback. But sometimes the grass actually is greener. Sometimes the bold move is the right move. Sometimes you have to be willing to admit a mistake and chart a new course before you waste years trying to salvage something that can't be saved. The Browns are at that crossroads right now. Every game, every drive, every incompletion adds fuel to this fire. And whether it's Watson finding his form, or Stefanski revolutionizing his play calling, or the front office making a franchise-altering decision next April, something has to give. Because 0 to 5 can become 0 to 17 faster than you think, and once that happens, the damage to this franchise might take years to repair. So here's what I'm watching for in the coming weeks. Can Watson show any signs of being the player Houston fell in love with? Can Stefanski adjust his scheme to maximize what his quarterback can actually do right now? Can this offensive line give their skill players a chance to make plays? And most importantly, can this organization be honest with itself about where it really stands? Because Browns fans aren't asking for perfection. They're just asking for a plan, a vision, a reason to believe that someone in that building knows how to fix this. And if that plan includes drafting Shedeur Sanders and starting fresh with a new era of Browns football, I don't think anyone's going to complain. The next few weeks will tell us everything we need to know. This team will either find its identity and start stacking wins, or the tank for Shedeur movement will go from social media chatter to legitimate organizational strategy. Either way, this is must-watch football because the stakes couldn't be higher and the consequences couldn't be more significant. Cleveland Browns football has always been about resilience. About passion, about a fan base that refuses to quit no matter how many times they get knocked down. That hasn't changed. What has changed is the tolerance for mediocrity, the willingness to accept losing as just part of the process. This generation of Browns fans wants championships, and they're not afraid to demand the moves necessary to get there. So buckle up, Browns Nation. This season is far from over, and the story we're watching unfold could be the most important chapter in this franchise's history. Whether it ends with Watson's redemption or Sanders' coronation remains to be seen. But one thing's for certain, We'll be here breaking it all down, keeping it real, and fighting for this team every step of the way. The future of the Cleveland Browns starts now, and we're all witnesses to whatever comes next.